So good morning, everyone. It's 11:15 sharp, and we were advised that we will start very sharply. It is a pleasure to see you all today, and it is a pleasure for me to introduce our Vice President for Banking, Mr. Alain Piu, a true spiritus movens behind banking operations of EBRD, who will open today's event. Alain, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good morning, dear annual meeting guests and dear colleagues and friends. Firstly, let me thank Anna Draskovic, the Director of Business Development, and her team for hosting this special session as part of this year's annual meeting of the Board of Governors and Business Forum, which is of course held virtually, but now we know how to mute and unmute. We have become masters, all of us, so I'm sure there will be no issue. Secondly, I would like to say how delighted I am to be in the company of a panel of distinguished speakers from some of Europe's leading foreign direct investment business associations. And they are our business partners, our colleagues, and our friends. So with us today are Géraldine Lamblay, the Deputy CEO of MEDEF International. Very nice to see you again, Géraldine. We have Javier Sierra, the Executive Director for Business Internationalization in ISEX of Spain. So bienvenido, Javier. We have Petri Vorio, Director, Entrepreneurship, Business Policy and EU Affairs in the Confederation of Finnish Industries. I'm sorry, I cannot greet you in the Finnish language, Petri. And we have Stefan Kegebein, the Regional Director for Eastern Europe and Head of the Working Group on Digitalization at the Ostausschuss der Deutschen Wirtschaft, an old friendly organization. We have not met Mr. Kegebein, but I've known your colleague, Mr. Harms, forever. We were even together in Moscow in the distant past. So V Gates. And we have Tonia Spolen-Berens, the Director of Poland and the Baltics in Enterprise Ireland. So welcome, Tonia, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I will not remind you what EBRD is about, just a few facts, just to put the figures right. We are not a massive organization. We invest 11, 12 billion euros a year in a very large number of transactions, however, 400, 450 transactions. We have done more during the pandemic than in normal times, which is good news for our clients. And this in particular, thanks to a very decentralized network in every single of the 38 geographies, 38 countries we work in across 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. As you know, the EBRD is very much focused on the private sector. We have committed to our shareholders, or recommitted, that 75% at least of our activities have to be in the private sector. Our strategy for the next 5 years is extremely simple to remember and not particularly surprising. We want to make sure that the countries where we operate are more green, more equal, and more digital. And of course, it resonates with the strategy of quite a number of organizations, including the European Union. You know that our model rests on a combination of business and policy engagement, which is very practical. It means that, for example, when we work in renewables, we first of all, draft the necessary legislation and decrees and power purchase agreements with governments before or in parallel with our investment. This is what we did in Egypt, for example. And it has become, I must say, a very powerful model. Now, in order to implement that model and to invest equity and to lend money, because we do both, as we know, we try to mobilize as much foreign investment as we can with globally minded investors. FDI is pivotal to our work. Are we entirely satisfied with the level of FDI in our regions? No, we are not, because there have been waves of FDI, and at the moment, the situation is a bit muted. First of all, because there is a lot of wait and see by a lot of investors because of the pandemic and the uncertainties on demand, and also sometimes because the investment climate is not what it should be in certain countries, and you have seen some regions or sub-regions where it is very clear that there has been recently a deterioration. So we need to work even more together in order to do better and to have more FDI, to mobilize more FDI in the countries where we operate. We are lucky to have a very strong and very close cooperation with our friends from leading FDI business associations, such as the ones that are on the panel today. We talk, we exchange ideas, we promote each other's offer, value proposition to companies and like-minded investors to bring about investment and change in our regions and to unlock the investment potential of many of the countries where we work. The private sector is a critical enabler to change, and for us, it is key. Today's panel will therefore take a high-level look at how the world of business perceives the EBRD's regions as an investment destination, the opportunities, the challenges, and what it might mean in terms of potential for global expansion and growth strategies. Dear guests, I trust that you will find this session enlightening, and I also urge you to contact the business development team via the networking app and speak to them about any business ideas that you may have for in any of the countries where we operate, and they will connect you to a network of bankers, whether in the countries or the sectors or the products that we propose. I will not stay too long with you, unfortunately, because I am very busy with a lot of bilateral meetings in this AGM, as I'm sure you understand. But I'm extremely happy to have had the opportunity to introduce. And now, without any further ado, let me hand the virtual floor over to Anna Draskovic and to our panelists. Thank you very much. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Alain. And as you rightly said, we are here to learn from our friends in business associations. How can we do more and how can we do better in our countries? So what I would like to start by asking all of you is maybe to introduce briefly your association to us, and maybe just give us a couple of lines on what do you think your businesses are looking at in this year, especially in the context of COVID, which is hopefully going to go away. So maybe we can start with Geraldine. So Geraldine, over to you.
Thank you, Anna, and good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for your invitation. Actually, MEDEF International is the French private business network abroad. So we gather companies, French companies, which are working, operate all around the world. And our job is to support their development around the world, but China, by the way, we don't work with China, and to liaise with the decision makers, prescribers, which are important, who are important for developing their projects. And when I'm talking about projects, it's mainly investment, it's not only export, of course. What we observe through the past year, actually, well, first of all, everybody, I think, is aware that France endured a very sharp decline in its GDP by around 8% last year. This is the sharpest decline, actually, since the Second World War. But nonetheless, what we understand from our members is that they are very willing now to develop more their export. They understand that working at an international level is very important to survive, even if it's not finished. But around 50% of the company that were, there was an inquiry by Euler Hermes, and 80% of the French companies intend to increase their export this year, and 50% of them would like to expand actually to new foreign markets. So we are rather optimistic. We have already started to travel again, but as we travel with a group of companies, it was not very easy. I know that French companies travel around the world, but when you go with 15, 20, 30 companies, it's more difficult by the current time. But we started since March. We have started to travel again with a group of companies. I don't know whether I answered your question completely. I have a lot of information to give to you, but I don't want to be too long.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Actually, you did answer it, and I will come back to you with more questions to collect all the knowledge. And I think what you said about internationalization and actually expanding is very good and is a very encouraging signal for all of us. So maybe now we can move to Spain, and maybe Mr. Javier Serra can share with us a little bit on ICEX, your esteemed organization, and also how do Spanish businesses feel today?
Thank you very much, Anna. Well, ICEX is the official agency, the national agency to promote foreign trade and cross-border investment, meaning both foreign direct investment and overseas direct investment into Spain. So what we see recently is how our companies are feeling, as has already been said, that going abroad is an absolute necessity for recovery. So we see an appetite for international exports and investment, and we also see an awareness of how the international markets would be key for the recovery. And data statistics are already coming in pretty optimistic. I say not just compared to 2020, but also compared to 2019. So we perceive a clear commitment on the part of our companies for overseas businesses. So I fully agree with my French colleague that this time round, there is less a necessity to convince companies to go abroad than to provide them with the accurate information and opportunities to do so. We are conducting most of our meetings online, such as we are doing today here, but there is an appetite for foreign travel, and we expect maybe by the autumn we will restart our activities in the destination countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. And actually, it is very encouraging again to hear that you don't need to be persuading companies anymore to go abroad, that they are now actually actively coming to you. And I think in the next part of our discussion, we will come to that, how we can support them better and what we can do for Spanish and other businesses. And as you also nicely said, we can travel virtually. So now from Spain, we will be going to Finland. So I would like to ask Mr. Petri Borio to probably help us with the same questions, a brief introduction of your organization and what is it that Finnish business people are having on their mind today.
Thank you very much, Anna, and greetings from Helsinki. It's also, I mean, very warm here. I mean, not so often 27 here in Helsinki, but this is the day when we have. But well, First of all, about Confederation of Finnish Industries, we are a sister federation, I can say, of MEDEF in France. So we are their northern cousins. But EK represents the interests of different industries. We have member associations from over 20 different industries, and these businesses, they represent about 2/3 of the Finnish exports, our member companies, and as well as 2/3 of the Finnish GDP, and over around 70% of the private sector jobs. So that's our membership portfolio. But about the members and member companies right now, I would say that this Corona has changed the whole play field somehow here in Finland. The way we work, how we optimize value chains, and they have changed quite radically. And it's not only about Corona, but it's also new technology that plays a part. And our member businesses actually, they focus very much on these opportunities, what this digital and green transition will provide in the future. When we look at all these recovery packages, I mean, this is the main, let's say, point of interest, how to respond these opportunities and how to turn, let's say, Corona and these recovery packages as some business. We have a group called Digital Game Changers that we have worked with some 20-30 front-runner companies, and they have identified some areas where we can be, let's say, leaders in the Europe. For example, the carbon-free maritime logistics, the smart and clean energy solutions, and cybersecurity, industrial 5G. Perhaps I will tell more about those later during this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petri. I'm happy to hear you have 27 degrees. It's only 17 in London, so I'm getting increasingly jealous. But it's great to hear from you that green and digital are the key themes for Finnish businesses, because these are the pillars of our own strategic capital framework here at the EBRD. Now, I would like to ask our colleague and friend from Ostausschuss, Stefan Kegebein, to tell us what is the situation with the German companies and how do they feel today about going international and which sectors they're looking at.
Thank you very much, Anna, and hello to everybody across the continent. So this is one of the advantages, I guess, Corona put on the table, that everybody is ready and able to meet even on a short notice across the country. So that is a very good news status that we have. Yeah, my name is Stefan Kegebein from the German Eastern Business Association, or Ostausschuss. I don't know which brand you prefer. We are a part of the Federation of German Industries and covering the 29 countries, starting with Poland and ending up at the Russian borders to China and Asian states. So everything in between, which you can call somehow Europe or Eastern Partnership or Central Asia, is range or part of our partners. What we do there is first we represent the German business in bilateral business bodies, in working groups, for example. And similar to the others, we are supporting and flanking the activities of our members and the German business in general. And of course, we maintain the networks in Germany and in the countries that we need when it comes to the need to have them. So beside that we are the department or part of the Federation of German Industries, we have a membership basement of some 300 German companies and big major business associations in Germany. So that means we cover more or less the export-oriented or international-oriented businesses in Germany. When it comes to trends or kind of outlook to this year and 2022, I guess for us, 5 points are from a higher relevance. That is first, the others mentioned it, the post-Corona situation. So strengthening the healthcare systems, we see a big push on digitalization and localization that might be a part of the industrial strategy from the countries, but could cause us problems for investors and international companies. So that is a positive and negative side. Green Deal, the second topic, the second very big issue. The recovery packages were mentioned. And for us and for the countries, it's very important to discuss and see the challenges and opportunities, especially non-EU countries in Eastern Europe are facing when it comes to the Green Deal. So there are many opportunities, but lots of challenges for the countries itself. The third point we see is the discussion around sanctions and the hotspots. So we see Russia and Belarus with relation to sanctions, and secondly the Southern Caucasus and the Western Balkans with regions where we see, let's say, a higher or slightly higher potential for a certain instability. So to be very cautious on that, but we have to face it. But anyhow, with very big potential and chances companies are still using. The fourth point we have on the table is this topic of system competition, seeing the Western Bloc, let's say United States, European Union and affiliated countries versus China and Russia, and the question of how will this decoupling process will go on, and how we still can have certain kind of engagement, cooperation, and so on and so forth. I guess for the next years, this will be very relevant for all European countries. And the fifth point, maybe not so important for the other countries, but in Germany, of course, are the elections we will have in September. So when we have a Green Party participation in the government, we expect that the policy towards Eastern Europe might change or might face a certain change. So that are the 4 or 5 points I would just introduce.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It was actually a very good as an introduction to some of the questions that I will be asking a little bit later on the overall context and the regions and the destinations for the investment. But before I go there, I would like to ask Tonya to tell us what is the situation with the Irish companies nowadays, and what are their priorities at the moment?
Good morning, Anna. Thank you very much for kindly inviting us today, and thank you to Alan for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and we have a great relationship with the EBRD and the team in London. So my name is Tonya. I recently took up the role as manager of the Warsaw office for Enterprise Ireland. And for those of you who are not familiar with Enterprise Ireland, we are the government organisation responsible for the development and growth of Irish enterprises in the world markets. We work in partnership with Irish enterprises to help them start, grow, innovate, and win exports in sales in global markets. We have over 30 overseas offices and 9 regional offices in Ireland, and we cover all sectors. So from the Warsaw office, we manage the Polish market and the Baltics. And we have a great interest in EBRD's activities because they're obviously very relevant to our region. So what we have found is during the COVID lockdowns and restrictions, companies have had a chance to kind of take stock of how they're operating and what way they're producing and manufacturing. And what we've noticed is because of COVID and the logistics and the costs of moving production lines, people are beginning now to look a little bit closer to home. And certainly for Ireland, Central and Eastern Europe is that little bit closer. I think there's a huge amount in green considerations and considerations for the environment. And one of the initiatives led out by the EBRD, the Green Cities Initiative, is something that we're extremely interested in and how we can become part of the solution. We have many Irish companies who have green, smart and digital solutions that can help improve the environment, which, given the current circumstances and everybody complaining of the heat, when we see the temperatures rising across the globe, I think we all are on board with assisting in this particular mission. It's very important for all of us. Also, from a business point of view, it makes great business sense, and companies are now obliged in many cases when they're bidding for public sector tenders to really take care of their carbon footprints. And this, I think, again, is an opportunity for the EBRD regions. And I suppose the one thing I've learned over the years of working together with the EBRD on business opportunity seminars and things like this is the EBRD are a very approachable organisation. Their tenders are not as daunting as those from maybe the bigger or from other IFIs. And my role prior to becoming the manager out in Warsaw was managing the relations between Enterprise Ireland and the other IFIs, such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank. And I suppose EBRD has always been that little bit more attractive to look at because it's that bit closer to home. So I think there's great opportunities, and I'm delighted to be part of the panel today. And I hope that we come away with maybe a few suggestions and solutions to work together.
Thank you very much, Tonya. You're absolutely right. Having in mind the climate challenges in the world, I'm sure Irish companies will be super busy with delivering solutions together with us in green cities. But also, thank you for your nice words on finding it easy, relatively easy to work with us, especially on the procurement side, because this is one of my major fears, that we are maybe a little bit too complicated. So this is encouraging to hear. Now, one thing we would like to actually have as a takeaway today is how can EBRD do better, and what is it that we can do to support your businesses more? So what I would like to ask all of you is to actually help us understand which parts of EBRD's value proposition work well for your companies, for the companies you represent through your associations, and where do you think we could improve? We could always improve, so I'm sure there is space. And maybe we can keep the same sequence and start with MEDEF International. So Geraldine, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Anna. Yes, I would like first to start saying that, of course, the EBRD is seen as a key partner in its countries of operations, where we work with French companies, and most notably, of course, in Central Asia and the Eastern Europe, where the bank is actually considered by French company as the most active and locally represented development bank. That's the first point. The second point is that we have worked very closely with the EBRD for the past 15 years across its geographies, and then we signed an MOU in last December with you. And actually, our members are very familiar with about EBRD's visions and activities. And in addition to these, actually, whenever we go abroad with business delegation, business missions, we systematically meet the EBRD's local team, thanks to your business development department. So it works very well, and exchanging with your local teams is very useful to deepen companies' understanding and knowledge of the economic situation and the ongoing projects. So this is the first or second point. The third one is that we draw SME's attention to EBRD's financing and instruments. The only point is that they are maybe a little bit scared, do not feel themselves concerned because of the level of financing that the EBRD proposes. It's a little too high for them, the engagement, financing engagement. Is often too high, and it restricts them from participating in the EBRD finance projects. But nevertheless, what we do appreciate very much for French companies, and what they do value from the EBRD, which is rather close to what we're doing at MEDEF International, very complementary. First, you mentioned it, this is governance. Because wherever French companies work with the EBRD, they are more quiet, I would say, due to some corruption risk, and they know that the EBRD will protect them in some way from these kind of problems, and from political risk as well. And the second point is regarding a business. That is true, and it was noticed by some of the speakers, that the direction, the priorities of the EBRD do correspond to French companies' priorities. And we had a forum yesterday about the export, or the back to export, that was the name. And actually the two sectors, or the two key points of these exchanges with French company were about digitalization as a new mean of doing business. It's not only a way of improving business, but this is just a mean of doing business. And then there is a second point, decarbonation, the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. And the president of MEDEF, who chaired this meeting, was saying that within a couple of years, the main point for MEDEF will not be longer social discussions with our professional associations. It will be environment, climate. So and this is a risk and an opportunity, because you have to finance it. And we think that the EBRD is a key partner in its region for such projects.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. This was actually very useful for us to learn. And I think the point you raised also on the financing levels is very well taken, and we will share it with our bankers, because this is exactly what we want to try to do, to become even more attractive and useful for businesses in FDI countries. And again, fully agreed on the importance of environment. And actually one important element there is that I always used to think, you know, when you do environmental projects, that they always come with some significant costs and it needs to be expensive, but actually doing projects in line with ESG standards can be highly profitable. And I think this is where we want to work together with all of you. So similar question to our Spanish friends. So Javier, what is the view of Spanish businesses of the EBRD, our value proposition, and where can we do a little bit better in your opinion?
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, well, I agree with former speakers that EBRD is widely recognized as an approachable international financial institution, and it's also known as a provider of finance to the private sector, which makes it different from most of the others, although other IFIs are also increasing the importance of the private sector in their operations, and particularly in the countries of operations of the bank. As to the particular situation of our companies, we have seen that the geographical concentration of overseas direct investment by Spanish companies has increased recently during the pandemic. It was already heavily concentrated on OECD countries, particularly European Union and North America, but that's even getting more concentrated, not just because of the pandemic, but also because of governance issues, which were mentioned by Alain during his keynote speech. So, of course, Latin America is still an area of interest for our companies, but both the pandemic and the political situation there make it less attractive nowadays. We are particularly keen on having our companies approach the countries of operation of EBRD, countries such as Poland, or of course the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean. In the current situation, the shortening of supply chains and the nearshoring of operations in Asia make it more interesting for our companies to set up shop in those areas. So we would like to work closely with the bank to make it closer to our companies, the opportunities in those areas, as well as the financial solutions provided by EBRD. We expect, as I said earlier, that in the near future, I hope in the autumn, we can restart activities on the ground, so our companies get first-hand knowledge of the opportunities in those areas. And as to the particular industries, a lot has been already said about Green Deal. We do have companies well established in areas such as renewable energies, resilient infrastructure, agribusiness, new automobile, new energy vehicles, or healthcare. So all those are areas where our companies are very active around the world, and we expect to do that more in the countries of operation of EBRD with support from the bank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. And actually what you said about the supply chain and maybe going more international and maybe diversifying the countries where Spanish businesses are investing is very important for us to hear, because we know there is always a trade-off between risk and returns, and companies are clearly averse when it comes to risk, but sometimes due to returns and the opportunities, it does make sense going to countries which maybe they would not consider initially. And I think this is where EBRD comes in, because we are there to help with, as Geraldine said, political risks and governance. And I think where we can work together to maybe persuade Spanish companies that our countries of operations are probably more attractive than they would seem to them. So we need to work together on sharing this knowledge. Thank you very much. And the similar question for Petri. I know we didn't work very intensively together, but we started with some very good events recently, and maybe you can share with us some initial feedback from Finnish companies. What is it that they like about EBRD, and maybe what is missing in our proposal?
Yes, sure. I mean, even if the cooperation or strengthening the cooperation between EK and EBRD has not so long roots, I mean, anyway, Finland and EBRD, as well as our member companies and EBRD, have very long history together. I mean, Finland was one of the co-founders of EBRD 30 years ago, and the cooperation starts from there. And our member companies, I mean, the major cooperation areas have been especially in the energy sector, first of all, of course, digitalization as well, that both are trending nowadays still. For example, in our neighboring countries, the projects there, I mean, Baltic countries, former Soviet Union region, Poland, and so on. In addition to this, very important part of the cooperation has been that Finnish banks are involved to the trade facilitation program and providing trade finance instruments to our exporters and importers by this. I mean, if we look at the back mirror and the value, added value, I mean, for example, in 1990s in our neighbor regions already, I mean, former Soviet Union region, I mean, the banking sector reform, for example, there EBRD contributed greatly. 2008 global financial crisis, I mean, strengthening the crisis resilience of the banking sector in the region, as well as supporting many investments to renew the production facilities capacity in the region, that has provided great opportunities for the Finnish businesses that are well known of investment goods, especially. As well as we have been happy that the mandate and region has been expanded. I mean, very EBRD can cooperate. For example, 2010, the southern and eastern Mediterranean area, and what opportunities, for example, water projects, as well as let's say improving the opportunities for women's entrepreneurship in the region. That has been great work and extra value provided by EBRD. As well, then 2015 Paris Agreement and this climate targets. I mean, all of us are needed to fulfill these targets, and it's very important, perhaps the most important task of the world nowadays. So there is a good contribution as well. Then to sum up, I mean, about EK members' feedback. I mean, our member companies say that EBRD is very flexible cooperation partner. As well, I mean, if we compare with other IFIs, I mean, we see that you can deliver much smaller projects as well. I mean, that matches very well to the Finnish companies. We are not as large always as the most global companies and the largest companies. So even our SMEs have been capable to participate some projects, and that doesn't take place in many IFIs, I would say. Your focus areas also have very good match with our expertise. I already mentioned the green transition and digital transition. There is our expertise, and perhaps what could you do better or more? It's about communication, what we can do together. I mean, provide case examples of success stories, perhaps make EBRD opportunities better aware among our members. As well as I would like to see still, I mean, that the mandate would be expanded someday. I mean, when we talk about sub-Saharan regions, for example, we have our government just established last spring very ambitious Africa strategy, and it would be great to see more cooperation in these regions as well with EBRD and the Finnish businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petri. Actually, I think tomorrow our board will be deciding on our expansion. So fingers crossed that we will be able to support Finnish and other businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think what you mentioned about women in business and our inclusion work is important. But I would like to stress another point which you shared with us, and this is our work on banking sector reform in post-Soviet Union countries. I think the strength of EBRD is also in our policy work, and as Alain mentioned in the beginning, we actually shape business environment, and we can help your companies have the setup and have the legislation that they need to truly develop and to truly have their projects done properly and see it through the end. So happy to keep working with you also on promoting EBRD in Finland. And now over to Germany. So Stefan, from your experience, what is it that German companies are benefiting most when it comes to EBRD offer? and what can we improve to serve them better? I think you're on mute, so maybe you can check.
Now I'm. So Alon told in the beginning we are all pros now in unmute and mute ourselves, but sometimes it happens. Maybe a first view from the German perspective to Eastern Europe, our range of countries. So German foreign trade balance consists of almost 20% with the countries we cover in Central and Eastern Europe. That means there is an meaning of the region lays in itself. So, and among the top 20 German trade partners, 5 are from Central Eastern Europe and Eastern Europe. So that means the field where EBRD is active is inherent important for German business. So that is a general feedback. And when we talk to companies, more or less, not everybody, but lots of companies invested in the countries organized this investment. This investment together with EBRD, and EBRD engagement always gives more stability. The previous speakers mentioned it, so that's why EBRD is very, very often a preferred partner when it comes to investments, among others. But it's really an anchor that shouldn't be missed. Yeah. So when it comes to the future, maybe first we as Austauschschluss have a very good cooperation and vivid cooperation with EBRD. So we have regularly together smaller or bigger formats, meetings, discussions where experts from EBRD are joining. Lately in March, we had one on financing trends in the post-COVID situation. In spring, your president was in Berlin and we participated in the dinner. So we would be very happy and very glad if you could provide experts to our sessions, and that we vice versa can join your sessions to tell you the position and the views of the German business. If we can cooperate in this sense further, and we will be very happy and glad, because the cooperation right now is on a very good level from our point of view. And some other topics for the future, I guess the support of the transition to decarbonize the economies, especially I mentioned it in the non-EU countries in Eastern Europe, would be very, very important. So we see that lots of companies and countries see the challenges, see the costs at the moment, but do not really have the solutions and do not really have the financing. And my view is that they now fear a bit what comes up in the next 5 or 10 years. And I guess their EBRD and other IFIs could play a very crucial role to support this transition process and to try to make some business, to help to make some business out of this process, and not only generating fears and dangers for the country. So that would be very important. And one very concrete topic where we can maybe start a more in-depth cooperation or discussion together with companies and other associations. We are working on a position paper on the tender conditions in one of your portfolio countries. These days we will finish this paper, and we would be very glad if we can discuss this paper with you, with EBRD. We will do this with other decision makers from politics and association as well. But I guess it would be very good to have a partner or a contact point at EBRD to take up this tender condition topic, because I guess it's not only a question for German companies, for international companies applying for tenders, but for other European companies as well.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And my answers to all 3 of your points are yes, yes, and yes. And on the tender side, I think actually you hit the nail on the head. I think many companies struggle with it, and they are trying to understand how to walk through all these procurement processes. So we'll be very happy to look into the paper you mentioned. Also, when it comes to sharing expertise for our events, do count on us, and we will be very happy to invite you to our events too. But what you mentioned also about decarbonization, I think this is a big topic for all of us, and it would be great to actually have maybe a separate discussion with each and every one of you and your associations on this, because What EBRD is now doing, we are making Paris Alignment Agreement decisions part of all of our projects, actually. So we are developing an expertise, and we are developing a project cycle which will encompass all of these directives and which will actually significantly strengthen sustainability and decarbonization component of the projects. So let's talk about this, and let's see what are the concerns of your businesses, because I'm actually sure that our colleagues and we can help to make this simpler, more digestible, but also functioning in practice. I think this is very important. And maybe a similar question to you, Tonia. On, you already mentioned, and you were very kind to give a little praise to EBRD on us and our procurement. But maybe if there is anything else you would wish on the praise side, I always take the praise. But I'm also very open to hear from you. What can we do better to maybe serve Irish businesses more comprehensively?
Thanks, Anna. So I think going as the final speaker in this panel is always a bit difficult, and I would echo a lot of the sentiments expressed by the colleagues on the panel. So certainly the Spanish colleague speaking about the supply chain, bringing it a bit closer due to COVID. Our Finnish colleague there about raising awareness, absolutely agree. So from my point of view, I suppose the big win and big positivity around EBRD is the credibility and stability it brings to projects in the region. So, you know, the reputation of the EBRD is so good, and your guys are such experts who, you know, we've had them speaking at events, they're absolutely brilliant. So this is great. It's a great institution to promote among our companies. If I was to suggest a few small things, and this is coming from a market, Ireland, where we're a little bit smaller than our colleagues here, I think what would be very useful would be, let's say, raising the profile of companies who've been particularly successful in winning tenders. Because I always find when we run these business opportunity seminars, it's when the companies themselves give practical tips and hints on how to go about this. It makes the whole process less daunting for those guys starting out on it. Another aspect which would be very useful to us as the smaller partner in this would be if there was an option or possibility, even among the colleagues today, for a networking to, I'm a great believer in collaboration, partnering up to win. Are there tenders where an Irish company could offer part of a solution and we tender together? And if in some way we could facilitate these type of introductions, I think the EBRD is fantastic at engagement. We've had two events in the recent past. One was focused on the green cities, and we had Hero and John Seed, who are just top of the field in this area. And, you know, it's very, very encouraging for companies when they're dealing with authorities and banks like the EBRD, who really know their stuff. They're not ticking a box on green and sustainable. This is a really in-depth look at action plans and how we can make things better. So I suppose my 2 points would be really to make it more approachable, would be to highlight the success stories, you know, taking maybe smaller companies who've done well and who are able to operate at this level. There are tendering issues. The companies have to overcome capability issues on this. I come from a tendering background myself before I joined Enterprise Ireland, so I know the ins and outs of this. And you know, it's a bit like doing your final exam in school. You have to answer what you're asked, nothing more, nothing less. And if you don't write it, it's not known. But I would think that, and maybe networking if there was an interest among other organizations like ourselves to maybe help our companies to partner up. But again, Anna, as usual, I have to commend you on the fantastic teams you have in EBRD.
Thank you very much, Tonia, on behalf of my colleagues, and also on behalf of my team, because we are joined today also by them. So we have Enzo, who is helping with MEDEF and France. We have with us also Antonio, Chris, Saimana, and Beverly, who is looking after Ireland very well. And thank you for the points that you mentioned. I think you're right. Case studies speak more than any principles that we could discuss, and we should definitely work on that. And I like your idea of establishing some sort of network amongst yourselves as well. So EBRD would be very happy to provide a platform maybe for this, and I would like to actually now officially invite you all to our next annual meeting, which will happen in Morocco, fingers crossed, and then we can actually sit down and speak probably in much more detail than we are speaking today on how we can work together and how you can work more closely together between one another. It's always different, and it's always nicer, and especially in Morocco. But what I would also like to say is I monopolized our guests today. We also opened our chat for any questions that can come from the audience. So please feel free to ask questions. We have a chat box available, but we have about 10 minutes left, and maybe I can use this for the last round of questions and in anticipation of questions from the audience as well, which is what are the main obstacles for having more FDI investments in our countries of operation? So I know it's very difficult to answer it generically because our countries are different and all of them have different issues. But if you can maybe summarize in 2-3 points, what is it that our countries could do better or improve to facilitate more business flow from your companies? And again, we can start with MEDEF. So Geraldine, over to you.
Yes, this is a tough question for 2 minutes. Answer.
I know. We know how much you know and can't, so it's never easy.
I will take some examples to be concrete. As far as we were, since March, we've traveled to Serbia, Poland, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and I think, and then to Africa, but it's not your concern. And what we noticed actually, well, it really depends on the country, but what we noticed is first of all, the pandemic risk. So there's uncertainty about this because nobody knows how it will evolve. Even in these countries, there's very little vaccination. And it's not good for the future, I mean, regarding the Delta variant, etc. So this is a stop and go process. So we went to Poland with a small group, then a week later it was closed, you see. We went to Ukraine, it was closed when we launched the delegation, then it opened once more. So it's very difficult, to plan this first point. The second point is about risk of non-payment. This is what we heard from our members, and the financing needs are very high for these countries, and they have already some high debts, and therefore the vulnerability of their projects increased. Then I would say the legal risks, standards and certifications and changing regulations. From time to time it's difficult to follow to go after them, or they are doing reforms and then they do counter reforms, and I'm thinking about Ukraine, stop and go striking corruption, and then there is when we were in Kazakhstan, especially the weak contract enforcement. So some countries, as in Kazakhstan, some countries do not respect their engagements, and this is a major risk for companies. Then, of course, the custom barriers and transport costs that are huge. They were, well, I'm thinking about ship transportation, and it was multiplied by 3 or 10. I can't remember. It is just not reachable anymore for some companies to export or to import from Asia, for example. And then, of course, I know that the EBRD is doing some financing in local money, and this is very, very good and very welcome by companies, because it's sometimes important and useful. But in the current days, there's a very high level of foreign exchange risk, and it hampers the willing and the investment of French companies. And then, of course, you have the political unrest. I mean, it's moving everywhere. You don't know what to expect, and it's moving in unexpected ways. So, these, I would say, the 6 or 7 points that I would underline.
Thank you, Geraldine. I knew you were the right person to talk to about this, and actually, I compliment you on the bravery of you and the businesses to travel so extensively in such difficult circumstances. But I think the points you mentioned are actually excellent, and we will be sharing it with our colleagues that work on risk mitigation structures. And while you were talking, you reminded me of the days when I worked in the government, and I remember discussions around how businesses actually need predictability more than anything else. Political predictability, legal predictability, financial predictability, and there was none. So this is something that we need to work on. And I think when it comes to the risk of payment that you mentioned, this is where organizations that do credit insurance come in place, like Euler, Hermes, and similar ones. So hopefully, working together, we will be able to address and mitigate some of those. Thank you. And the same question for Javier. So do the Spanish businesses feel the same in this respect? And are they facing similar challenges as Geraldine just described?
Yeah, I mean, speaking after Geraldine, it's very difficult to add anything new. We perceive the same risk on the side of our companies. Of course, the pandemic has